I'm Ben Hartman, and I'm at Clay Bottom Farm. And if you want to see more resources, go to claybottomfarm.com. And we've got the Lean Farm School and lots of resources. And if you like what you see here, just check out that webpage. And I'm here today with John Hendrickson, who owns smallfarmworks.com. And so I wondered, John, if you would introduce our visitors here today.
Sure. So Take-san and Nakagawa-san are here from Japan. They work with the paper pot system in Japan. Nakagawa-san works making the paper pots for Niten, and Take-san is their exporter to outside of Japan.
And we're standing behind a paper pot transplanter. And this is one of my favorite tools on the farm. It shaves all kinds of waste from our process. First, it shaves motion waste. We can transplant our crops much faster with this tool. And then it shaves a lot of defect waste. Our crops are much more successful if they go through this paper pot system than if we try to direct seed the crop. When was it? When was the first paper pot chain in use?
20 years ago.
Okay, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are the crops that the Japanese farmers are growing with this tool?
Mainly green onion.
Oh, green onions. Okay. And what other crops?
Flowers, spinach, broccoli, cabbage, and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's pretty popular then.
Yes.
Different crops. And can you tell me how you came across the tool?
Well, my family and I were living in Japan for a year back in 2004 to 2005, and I was at home trying to learn what I could about small farms and small farm equipment in Japan, and I came across some photos of an orange transplanter. Although it wasn't clear what it was and what it was doing, but I asked my wife, who speaks and reads Japanese, to tell me what it was when she came home from work, and she said it was a paper chain putting plants in the ground machine. And I thought, that sounds interesting. So we contacted the company, and they did a demonstration for us, and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe how fast the plants were going into the ground. And because I'm a vegetable farmer in the US, I said right away, I want one of those. And I think I can sell them to other farmers in the United States.
Okay. And about when did that happen? When
So
did you
I
start marketing these?
We sold our first transplanters in 2006.
Okay, so not too long ago in the U.S. And how have sales gone in the last 10, 12 years? Is it taken off here or not?
It's really taken off over the last several years. I think in the beginning it was so new and so different that some people were a little skeptical. When you think about paper being used in a greenhouse around water, you kind of think, well, how could that work? Isn't the paper going to dissolve? Is it going to rip? Is it really going to perform well? And so we had to get it out on enough farms who tested the system and who learned that it worked well, and then the word started to spread. And then in the last couple of years, sales have gone up dramatically.
Okay, excellent. And talk about organic certification. Okay.
So my farm has been certified organic since I started my farm. Well, actually, organic certification wasn't required when I started my farm, but once it was required to be certified, I certified. And so I asked my certifier if I could use the paper pots on my farm back in 2005 when I came back from Japan. And my certifier spent a lot of time trying to decide, because there was nothing in the National Organic Program rule about using paper pots. The only places that paper was mentioned in the organic rule was that it can be used as mulch and that it can be used as a feedstock in compost. And so our certifier said, well, if it can be used as mulch on top of the soil, and if it can be used in compost that goes into the soil, then we should be able to use paper pots as transplanting to go into the soil. So they allowed me to use it starting in 2006, and then other certifiers followed their lead, and most other certifiers were saying okay, although not all certifiers were saying okay. Just this past year, the National Organic Program decided that starting next year, paper pots are not allowed. And that's not just these paper pots, but any paper pots, because Currently, the rule only says that paper can be used as mulch or as feedstock in compost. There's nothing in the rule about it being used as a paper pot. So that's actually the first thing that we have to get changed by petition through the National Organic Standards Board, is that a paper pot is an acceptable use of paper on an organic farm.
Yeah, so you could make compost out of the chain, the material the chain's made out of. You could use it in your compost heap. You just can't transplant with it at this point.
Correct.
Yeah.
As ironic as that seems, that is,
that's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
So we get a lot of ideas from other cultures, other traditions. So thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate it. Do you have any suggestions? Anything you want to say to growers in the U.S.?
Compost system is very unique system and only one system in the world. So very interesting. Please try this system first. I believe it is very good for you.
Great pick.
Yes.
Yeah. It is a truly unique system.
Yes.
I remember the first time that I encountered it, I thought there's no way this is going to work. You can't grow plants in little cells made out of paper. And however, I gave it a shot. And from the moment I started using it, I realized this is going to shave hours of time, and it's going to make my work much easier to do. And so it fits very nicely within the lean system, because lean is not just about working faster. It's not just about getting your job done faster, working harder. It's about fundamentally adding value for the customer with fewer motions, with easier work. So it smooths the flow of our farm. Motion. Okay, so I'm going to transplant a basil, and I've got this in 6-inch paper chains. So it's going to give me 6-inch spacing between the transplants. And we're going to do 2 rows in here. This is about a 30-inch bed width. And we're tucking them in the greenhouse. Basil doesn't take up a ton of room, and peppers don't take up a ton of room. So I'm going to tuck some basil between our pepper plants in here. And basil shares about the same growing season as peppers. So one of the things you'll notice, and I do this with almost everything that I transplant, is I'm soaking it. Okay, and so the transplant has a lot of moisture as it goes in. And the reason I like to soak is because it's easier. Then I don't have to go around, I don't have to do irrigation after I get my transplant put in. And I did have drip tape on here too. And so there's plenty of moisture in here as well. Okay, so I'm planting a wet transplant into wet ground, and then I know it's going to be successful. It's going to take off very quickly. And then I'll slip this piece underneath to aid in the transplant. And then as I'm walking, I'm going to be adjusting the pressure on the handle here, either pulling up or pushing, whatever's needed, so I'm not covering the plant too much. And so I'm not leaving it out of the ground too much too. Oops. So there are a couple ways you can walk. I know some farmers like to walk in this direction, and some will do this type of motion. And then sometimes you can walk along with a scooting motion like this too. So these guys are pushing between 3 and 4 weeks of age. And they're at a great height for transplanting because they're big enough. I'm able to get them in without covering them. And yet they're not so huge that the plant has become stressed from sitting in the trays for too long. I have a son who's 2, and he loves to work with me, and he always walks along, and he said his handle's right here, and he pushes here. So it's important to train your kids to push the same direction. Sometimes they'll pull against me, but he has to push it. So. And actually, I wish there were two handles because I have a 4-year-old too. The furrowers
Once
in here.
this part of the transplanter is in the ground, it really wants to track in a straight line.
Yeah.
And then you just have to make sure that you're running parallel. If you're doing tractor cultivation, you may want to have marks so that you're tracking straight.
It's designed for humans to be using, and short people, tall people, anyone can get behind it and start using it. And now there is some finesse involved.
Correct.
And I know that it takes a couple weeks sometimes for a new grower to really get a feel for the nuances of the tool. I found that if you have a soil that has too much moisture, then it can gum up the machine. And at the other end of the spectrum, an overly dry soil, the soil just kind of falls apart and it doesn't quite stick together enough to pack in really nicely around the transplant. So. However, once you get a sense for the feel of the tool and the bed preparation you need, it easily saves 8 hours a week off of our transplanting during our spring transplant season.